Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Mysteries Unknown. On tonight's podcast, I've got Mike with me, and Mike had a Class A encounter while he was out at the land between the lakes. A lot of things happen out there. This is a really cool story. You don't want to miss it. But before he jumps into that, I want to take just a second to say thanks for watching and sharing these podcasts. Without you, it wouldn't be possible. If you have a mystery you would like to share, you can send it to me by email at video@jscreativear.com. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
I'm happy you're here, man. I know me and you've had a little bit of technical difficulties trying to record this podcast, but we got you on. I want to get your story out there. And so why don't you take us back to the beginning, kind of what happened, and just start there.
Right. So it's over in Land Between the Lakes. That's a place I've been going since the late 80s. Hunting and fishing has always been a big part of my life. I'm thankful that my wife and my children enjoy it also. So we purchased a pretty nice little fishing boat in 2018 and had been fishing a couple years. We had just had our infant daughter. I guess she was maybe 6 months old. And COVID had hit. So my wife had not really been out. I'd been out a little. So on May 10th, we go out to Land Between the Lakes. It was actually our second day in a row. May 9th was a wonderful, warm, well, it's springtime, so you get a warm day, and then around here you get a cold day. So we'd had a great day on the Saturday. On Sunday, it was cooler. The wind was blowing. We couldn't get out on the main lake in the boat, so we went to a little secluded place. And what we liked to do was fish a little, maybe jump out on the bank, cook some hot dogs, fish a little more, and then go home. So this spot was down a 2-mile road. No, we didn't meet anybody or see anybody on the way down there. When we got down there, the boat ramp was actually closed, I guess, for COVID. And now this is the federal government runs this, but I put my boat in a little spot where it looks like they've been putting kayaks in. So I was able to get my boat down and in, and we quickly discovered it wasn't going to be a great boating or fishing day. But we had the hot dogs, so we just said, let's go ahead and pull up. And we found a tiny little spot where there was some banks. So I built a campfire, and my oldest daughter, had my 16-year-old daughter. My daughter was 4 at the time, and then our infant daughter, and then my wife. And while I was cooking the fire, I heard some people walking, what I thought were people walking. And there's a hiking trail about a mile from there that runs the whole length of LBL. It's called the North-South Trail. So they would have been off track, but I kind of thought maybe people are just out. So I asked the girls, though, to watch, because my back was to the ridge. There's a little ridge we were at the base of. And anyway, we cooked our hot dogs and got those eaten. And my daughter asked me, my oldest daughter said, what do you think happened to those people? And I said, I don't hear them anymore. They probably just saw we were down here, smelled the smoke. I don't know. But as I was about to push the boat off of a rock and a little tree there I had it tied up to, we heard a knock. A tree knock, like we've heard on all these shows, and they all looked up, and my daughter said, "What was that?" And I'm joking at the time. Now, I've been in the woods my whole life, and I don't think people are lying about their encounters, but I'm that guy. I've got to see it to believe it, And I looked down, and there was a stick. I don't know if you experienced it. Beavers chew the bark off sticks, and they'll leave. And they make good walking sticks if you've got one that's big enough. So there was a little one down there. I knew it would be a good hard stick. So I joked, they say Bigfoot does that. I picked this stick up and I hit this little tree. And immediately from about 100 yards down the bank in another spot, we hear another knock. And so now, they look at me, and I'm just, guys, it's kids messing with us. It's just people out. Everybody was out. Nobody was working or going to school or whatever. So instead of going to the other side of the lake where we were going to try to fish, I decided, let's go down the bank. There was a little cove there. Let's go in there and just see what's over there. And it was not full bloom yet. It was green. There was some foliage, but there was a burst of sun coming through on the side of the hill that was just really noticeable in one open spot. And I'm looking up there, and there was a Bigfoot standing there. And I'm a Christian, and I try to live right and do things right. I don't curse a lot, but I just say, holy, there's Bigfoot. And when I said that, it's almost like it hurt me. Now, let me add, after this, in an effort to try to understand and come to grips with this, I contacted the Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization, a guy named Charlie Raymond, and they helped me out a bunch, actually came out and did a follow-up. And in that, he did a range find. I was about 60 yards away at this time. And so when I said that, it kind of backed up. And I needed to turn the boat because I'm pointing. I want my wife to see it. And it starts running the opposite way. Well, when I turned my boat that way to actually spin her to where she could see it, then it comes back down, and it comes down a little gully. And at that time, we were about 30 yards away. And I saw its hand. And at the time, I thought it had pulled itself up by a tree because there was some trees shaking. But we've determined later, we think what happened is there was two of them. And I got between them with the communication. And so we think the other one was shaking the tree to tell the other one to come on, let's get out of here. Anyway, it ran off, and I kind of let the boat drift down the bank and had to gather myself. And my ears ring all the time. It's called tinnitus. I don't hear a lot with a lot of background noise. And I had actually, the fisherman in me, I'm like, well, let's just go over to the other side at least. I don't know if I would have fished anymore or not, but I didn't really want to leave. But this was shocking. As I hit the engine, my wife and my oldest daughter looked at each other, and you could just see their faces change. And they said to each other, that was a growl. Did you hear that growl? Did you hear that? And they're yelling at me to get out of here. At that time, we were in the back of the cove, and it was probably 60 or 70 yards to our trailer, but you could see the path where something here could have walked around and gotten to where our truck was. And my wife was genuinely scared. They heard this. They said it was a frustrated, guttural. It probably sounded just like the engine. It was like, I did not hear that, but they were really scared. So we just loaded up and got out of there. And I say this line. I tell people I've never looked at the woods the same way now.
It's a really incredible encounter, and thank goodness your family's okay and they're safe, because that could have went a lot of different ways. I know you had that sighting and you saw it. Did you smell anything? Did you feel anything? And kind of for our audience, kind of describe what you saw, what it looked like.
Well, okay, so we did not smell anything. Now, and I have subsequently, I'll get to that if we have time or you want to go into it. I'm so thankful that I was able to call somebody and they answered the phone, and it has really helped me come to a good place, because the woods were so much a part of my life. Again, I connect my relationship with God to the woods and being out. I wasn't raised in a church, but my dad, and taking me fishing my whole life, he would tell me a lot. If you look around and you think this is all coincidence from a big explosion, you're crazy. So I've always had that. So I had to find a way to deal with this. So feeling something, yes. And now to this day, I can almost kind of feel things. It connects with you. You don't at the time. I was just shocked and excited, and then trying to protect my family, but it's a once in a lifetime thing, So what I saw was probably, we actually went and remeasured. It was about 8 feet tall. It was the thing about these things is the width of them. We're getting used to now with 7-foot basketball players and big football players, big wrestlers. The size wasn't that imposing to me. It was just how wide this thing went. Totally fur covered. The eyes were really deep inset. There was a face there. There was a more human-like nose. I didn't really see the mouth. When you stare at these things, the width, the darkness of the eyes, they're deep. They're just deep. And then when it got a little closer, I was able to see that there was a palm. It wasn't a fur-covered. My sighting was a short uniform. So think like a big grizzly bear. And what was neat about it, and it made me know it wasn't somebody in a suit, when the light was hitting it, the hair reacted like you see here. So it was lighter hair colored and looked like a blondish, orangish, brownish. But when it got down in that gully where there was no light, I would describe it as dark brown.
Wow, that's really incredible. And it's one of those things that you're right. It's a once in a lifetime thing, because most people don't, I guess, have the opportunity. And it sounds like you were in a pretty safe place to see it if you were going to run into one of these things. Because I don't personally think they have good intentions. I really don't. But it sounds like it was really life changing. Are you, has it affected you going back into the woods? Are you okay doing that now?
Well, so I've got some rules now. That's the thing about it. I think, I don't think they want to be friends with people. I think they understand that people come with guns and an ability to hurt them. So I don't necessarily know. I tell you what I do. I don't go out at night. I don't go out at night. I think a lot of times they're trying to hunt. I think they're primarily nocturnal. And I think if we mess up their hunting or get in the way of their food and their eating, that's something that would make me mad if it was happening to me as a person. So I think there's probably some good ones and some bad ones. But for me, it's been really interesting to start looking at the woods a different way and seeing. I'm convinced now if you're in land between the lakes, you're probably being watched. I really honestly believe that. Um, we've had, I tell you, we've had a couple encounters. So we stay on the trail. My wife and I have hiked, and she thinks she wants to see one. But we heard one time. I've got about a, I don't know, 30, 40 pound pack I hike with, and I had my little daughter. This was a few years later on my shoulders, and I pack her up the hill. And there's some pretty big hills. And we got to the top, and she started screaming because she didn't want me to put her down. But I'm 51 years old now. I got to get some rest when I can get it. And when I set her down, we heard a jump. We felt it, and you can hear the bipedal steps. It's right over to our left. And I looked at my wife and I said, "Okay, it's going to be coming up right through here," and it was gone. And that's when you start looking at the supernatural aspects of this, because it was gone, and there was something there. It wasn't a deer. It was so then you go down that rabbit hole, and for my coping, I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole. I just you know what I mean? I looked at it as like if I was going to be in the ocean, I'd want to learn about sharks. If I was going to be in Alaska, I'd want to learn about bears. So I wanted to know what I could and could not do. Um, the neat thing, I don't call them. So I don't call them. I don't knock at them. I don't, if I happen to see one or be around the area. But one time, this was just this past year, this spring, we were in our boat again, way back in the back of a bay. It was getting dark. My daughter, she's 8 now, was just interested in the echoes, because you'll hear a boat coming, but you can't see where it's from. You'll hear people screaming or yelling, having fun on the water. And I was explaining to her how sound travels on the water. Well, it got late, and I was in my boat, almost dusk, and I just went, whoo, but really loud. Right behind us, we hear whoop, and you hear the P sound. So there's nothing out in the wild making a P sound. When that happened, the coyotes started going, and it got wild for a minute. And then up on the ridge, on this far ridge, we just hear this, and everything, the crickets stopped. And again, I don't go on that ridge. I have not been on that ridge since. It's a place where we had hiked before, but whatever's there, I'm going to leave it there and leave it alone.
I don't blame you. I definitely, you don't want to go into their territory, especially at night. And I think it's smart that you have rules, for when you go into the woods, because you definitely need those. Because, man, these things, you're talking about how broad they are, man. If they wanted to get you, they get you. There's nothing you could do.
This is the fastest thing I have ever seen on the land. It's like seeing a blur. And I was so fortunate to see that. But when I saw the original sighting, when I saw the one moving to my left, it was an honest blur. I just saw a shape and color moving this way. I don't think, had I not already locked in on where it was and that had happened, I don't think I ever would have seen it. So yes, and that actually kind of helped me cope with it, because I realized they've probably always been there. I've probably been watched. I think that day they were smelling the hot dogs and they were coming, and I really think the one behind us knocked to the other one and was like, "Hey, that's people. Let's just chill out." And then when I knocked, maybe it made the other one mad that they had been seen. Now I've heard of the scary bad experiences, and again, I don't think that people are lying about it. So it's again, I relate it to it if I was in Alaska with bears, and so. But yeah, it takes some dealing with. These people that've had these worst experiences. You're looking at having some PTSD and never be in the woods again. And I completely understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, I've talked to several people, and there's a handful of them that had some really bad experiences, and I know, two that will not go in the woods period anymore. They're done, and they spent their whole life in the woods. And I'm like you, I connect with God in the wilderness. That's where I go because it's peaceful. I think you can get closer to God out there, get away from the noise and stuff. But so with all that being said, and nobody knows for real, for sure. But what do you think Bigfoot is? And there's no wrong answer, but what do you think?
Well, again, for my frame of reference, I'm going to stick with some type of really well adapted natural being, and I'm going to put asterisks by it. You read in the Bible, you hear about the Nephilim. Yeah, there's cave paintings. You read about the all the Native American legends. They've got stories of these things, so they've been around a long time. I'm going to put an asterisk by it because if they had never disappeared on me, and I've had 2 or 3 other situations like that where if it was anything natural, I would have seen it. There's no way I could have not seen it, and they're gone. So, so when I hear about interdimensional or Nephilim or angelic powers, I don't count it out. It doesn't make me feel funny at all when somebody thinks that.
Yeah, I mean that because it would explain a whole lot. And I'm like you, Mike. I look through the lens of biblical and what fits in God's universe. That's the way I look at this, and so that checks a lot of boxes for me. But man, it's just a really interesting topic. I'm really glad that you're okay and you had those experiences and you're still with us. And I know we talked a little bit off air about it. You don't have to share it if you don't want to, but I personally had a couple of encounters with angels. Do you feel like talking about that? You don't have to.
Oh no, I absolutely will. So my dad was one of the original members of Delta Force. I was, and I can, I hate saying things that I can't prove. I can obviously prove that, but I was born on Fort Bragg, and I was the only Smith that hasn't served in the military, and I've got a blood disease called thalassemia, so I'm permanently anemic, and they wouldn't let me in, but I was very much raised that way, and I had just found out that I've got to have a different path. I was about 18, 19 years old, and so my parents were getting divorced, just a lot of stuff happening, and I knew there was a God, but I didn't have that relationship, and so I was spoiled. I had gotten a new truck for my graduation, and took it about a year and decided I want a 4-wheel drive. So I was going to the bank to have the banker sign the loan for my new 4-wheel drive because my new truck wasn't good enough for me a year later. And it was a hometown bank, and I was getting there early. The guy had been my family banker for forever. So I'm sitting on the tailgate of my truck waiting, and I look over, and there's this old man walking up a paved hill. I mean old. He's wearing a plaid shirt, and I forget, like a reddish plaid shirt, khaki pants, had one of those hats on with all the veterans buttons and stuff. And he said, "Young man, can I have a seat beside you?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He sat down, and he said, "You got any God in you, son?" And I said, "Well, I believe in God." And he said, "No, do you have the Lord in you?" I said, "No, sir, I don't guess I do." And he said, "Can I tell you a story?" He starts telling me a story from World War I. And this is 1989, 1990. And he told me that he'd come out of the trenches, and I'll give you the short version. He had come out of the trenches, and the gas, he was just, the way he described it, I thought I was there, and it was horrific. And they were going to retreat then, and they were working their way back, and he felt somebody hitting him and telling him when to go. He even mentioned that at one time he laid this way when the plane was coming down, and this voice told him to lay this way because it was harder for the planes to hit him with their machine guns. And he got back into the trench, and he assumed it was a buddy of his. When he asked where the buddy was, he said the buddy was gone and had not made it back. They never saw him again. And so about that time, the lady opened the bank doors and said, "Y'all come on in." And there's a set of double glass doors. When you walk in this bank, there's nowhere you can go besides in or out. And so I held the first door for him. I said, "Sir," well, he got the second door. He said, "Young man, go right ahead. I really enjoyed talking to you. Remember what I said?" And he opened the door. And I walked in, and the lady said, "Michael, Jerry will be with you in a minute." So I kind of, in that amount of time, I stepped out of the way because I thought he would want to get by me. He was gone. He was gone. And he wasn't moving that fast. I mean, it's just And I didn't realize it till a long time later. I then had another, see if you got a moment, I had another situation where I was engaged to an apostolic Pentecostal preacher's daughter, and that was really new to me. And I was fishing, and I'd been to a spot where I'd planned to catch a big bass, and I caught crappie all day. I went home for lunch. I went back with my crappie gear, and if you fish, I was using big stuff, and then I switched to little stuff. And I just saw the God rays, and it was beautiful, beautiful. And that's the first time I prayed in my life, and I cast out. I was using this tiny little bait, and I said, God, if you're there, and I throw out here and catch a bass, I'm going to go get baptized, and I'm going to jump in. I threw out there, and I caught a 7 to 8 pound bass on 4 pound test line. It didn't even fight. I thought it was hung, and I was reeling in a log. And I just fell to the ground, and I'm like, ah. And then a few years later, I realized that was an angel talking to me, and it chokes me up because I'm fortunate that the God of creation has reached down personally in my life for me. So I don't want to take that for granted, not at all.
That's amazing, man. I love to hear stories like that, and I appreciate you sharing that with us because, man, the Bible talks about we'll entertain angels unaware, and I've been fortunate enough to have 2 encounters like that, real similar to the first one you talked about. But man, just that's really amazing, Mike. I appreciate you taking the time to share that with our audience because it's important they know that. But thanks again for coming on the podcast and sharing your story, man. And I really appreciate you jumping on here. And guys, if you have a mystery or something you would like to share with me, you can send it to me by email at video@jscreativear.com. And as always, thank you so much for being part of this podcast because without you, it wouldn't be possible. We'll see you in the next episode, and stay prayed up.